Well, after a busy Christmas period and quite an intense few weeks at the beginning of this year, this week has been a bit quieter and I found some time to read. So much of our information and entertainment these days comes to us on screens and via the internet, and we're very blessed that that's the case. But I find it's a very different experience to sit down with a book. It requires you to stop, to relax a bit, to settle down. And a book which I've come back to this week is this one, Julian of Norwich's Revelations of Divine Love. You may know it, it's one of the spiritual classics, the first book written by a woman in the English language. Mother Julian was a contemporary of Geoffrey Chaucer. Well, as I've read, I've been aware of many connections with our time. Mother Julian lived and wrote in the 14th century in the midst of the Black Death. It started in Dorset in 1348, when Julian was about 6 years old, and it reached Norwich, where she was living, the following year. Like COVID, it was a deadly disease, and so contagious that anyone who touched a sick or dying person would catch it. About half of all clergy in Norwich died of it in its first phase and in subsequent outbreaks. And the 14th century was a troubled time anyway. Julian's birth coincided with the beginning of the 100 Years' War and the intermittent struggle between England and France. Taxes were high and harvests were bad, finally leading to the Peasants' Revolt in 1381. Church life was in turmoil too, with John Wycliffe protesting against abuses in the church and translating the Bible into English for the first time. It was a translation that offered power to the people and shook the religious establishment of his day. Interestingly, Mother Julian's book came out just 3 years later, after Wycliffe's controversial translation, also in English. It was a courageous move. Yet despite the struggles, Julian's writings are extraordinarily hopeful and full of the love of God. She spent most of her life in prayer, living as an anchoress in a cell attached to St Julian's Church in Norwich, from which she took her name. And her cell is still there, and if you ever have a chance to visit it, it's well worth doing. She followed the Benedictine hours of prayer at 7 set times throughout the day, and in between she would have been available to listen to people or to give spiritual guidance. Her cell had 2 windows, one into the church so that she could hear Mass and receive communion, and the other out onto the main road in Norwich, through which people could come and speak to her. Well, when she was 30 years old, she received some visions, some revelations, which dramatically changed her life and which became the basis for her book, The Revelations of Divine Love. Despite the darkness of the Black Death and the turmoil all around her, Julian's book is a treatise on the love of God, revealed to her by Jesus. She wrote, "Everything has being through the love of God. Even the smallest of things lasts and always will, because God loves it." And perhaps Julian's most significant revelation is this, that all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. It's a statement of faith that ultimately all things will be put right by Christ. It's also an understanding of the words of St. Paul, that God works all things together for good for those who love him, who are called to his purpose. And I think they're hopeful words for us as we work our way through this corona pandemic. And I pray today that we'll be able to receive them and to grasp them for ourselves. Mother Julian wrote, "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, within the love and the mercy and the purposes of God."